Welcome to Body by Books, a different podcast. The first of its kind. Not really. First of my kind of it being made. Yeah. I'm Casey.
And I'm Chris.
And we're going to talk about books today. Oddly enough, also monsters.
And bodies.
And bodies, yes. So yeah, we're going to talk about Frankenstein, the original bodybuilder. We'll just go off. We're going to start off. I am Abby Normal, Casey, and it's the introductory episode, and we're going to be discussing Mary Shelley's classic work, The Modern Prometheus, a.k.a. Frankenstein. And what hasn't already been said about this classic piece that has been solidified in storytelling as one of the most influential things of all time. Honestly, I don't know, but I might repeat a bunch of crap that other people have already said, but it doesn't matter. This is what I got out of the works and how it pertains to maybe creating a more healthy version of yourself. You're going to get kind of a review in the middle there, and there's going to be some interpretations, but it's more about the search of knowledge and what we can get out of these stories, other than just maybe a moral or whatever. So I guess we won't do too. I guess we're gonna be. It's got some spoilers. This is gonna be spoilery. So I'm kind of basically going over the whole story of the book, so you could kind of get an idea of what it's about. Yeah.
I don't know if it counts as spoilers if we're talking about a book that's like 100 years old.
Yeah, it's not. This is not. This is not The Mandalorian. This is a book that's been out for quite some time, and most people think they know the story, and they're always talking about stuff and like, no, you know the story of the movie. The movie and the book are explicitly way different.
Yeah.
Actually, you could say this is the first movie that proto-nerds would have been like gatekeepery about and been like, it's not as good as the book.
Oh yeah, no, this like sets the bar for changing, or maybe World War Z, but
well, yeah, World War Z is as close to the book as the movie World War Z is as close to the book as this is to the movie and the book. So Frankenstein and World War Z are like on par with each other as how closely they are related. There is a character in in this book. Frankenstein. That is the title character. He's in it.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we'll just jump right off into the story, right? The book starts off with a series of letters from a Captain Walton who finds Dr. Frankenstein on his travels and treats his ailments while discussing what he was doing so far away from his home. And when Frankenstein recounts what happened, we find out how pretty quick how different the tale is from the movie. And I'll spare the specifics, but Frankenstein's mother dies, which fuels his thirst for knowledge, which then drives him to figure out how to animate the inanimate. Just as a side note, this happens really early on in the book. He puts together a being that is much larger in scale than a regular person. It has yellow translucent skin and is scary enough to make Doc Frank basically drop a steam engine in his trousers and run away. When he comes back, the creature's gone, and immediately afterwards he runs into his friend, not Igor, which we'll get into because there's no Igor in this book, and I know that you're going to be really sad about that. But he takes him in. Not Igor takes him in and nurses him back to good health because he constantly is getting sick. Like, I guess this is just like par for the time, right? They people are just constantly getting sick all the time because half of this movie, Frankenstein is like dealing with how sick he is, and then shortly after he gets back into good shape, he's hit with tragic news and has to return home, and not Igor accompanies him through the rest of the book. Any thoughts leading up to this point?
I it definitely joined that club of people who I had read Frankenstein way early on, when I was probably like 9 or something like that, and then seen the movies, and the movies are pretty much my only recollection of what Frankenstein is. So even having read it before, I was like, "This is what Frankenstein is." Yeah. So that was a big surprise to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's. I have most of my Frankenstein knowledge comes from Young Frankenstein, even so. It's even more far removed as it can be. But yeah, so after a lot more bad news for the Doctor and his family, he runs into the monster. So who never actually gets a name, so we can call him Bubbles. Bubbles is way more articulate in the book that the movie gave credit for. He tells the story how over time he patiently watched a family from afar and learns how to speak and articulate his thoughts and emotions. He knows he is hideous and continues on in his hopes of one day being friends with the family and being accepted by the world. It doesn't work. He is chased away when he tries to talk to the oldest one in the family, who is blind. He knows that he doesn't have. He knows he doesn't have to run, and he can choose violence instead. But he really tries to be gentle. Following that encounter, and spoiler alert, that doesn't happen either. Bubbles is responsible for multiple deaths out of sheer spite. After he loses control because his dreams of being accepted seem to be far out of his reach, he believes Frankenstein to be the one responsible for his heinous deeds, and this is the part of the debate on who is the monster of the story. Is it Dr. Frankenstein himself, or is it Bubbles, the monster? In short, I would say the one committing the deed would be the direct responsible party. So especially given the fact that all the victims of the book are innocent and completely unaware of the Doctor's extracurricular activities, it doesn't validate the actions of Bubbles. And it doesn't mean Frankenstein is completely innocent. Grave robbing and playing God usually end up with a high price. And I will say this with an asterisk because the book specifically says animate the inanimate. It doesn't necessarily say that he went grave robbing, but for the sake of the concept here and that he made a living being that has emotions and such, we'll say that he did animate corpses. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it now too. I don't think it specifically said he was illegally procuring corpses from a graveyard. That's it. He did have a laboratory somewhat through the school, so that could have had probably much more lax standards on how you might be able to acquire corpses. So he could have just had access to this stuff for study and whatnot. But
yeah, I mean, technically, in technical terms, you could say even Weird Science, the movie, is based on the Frankenstein idea of Frankenstein because they animate something that is inanimate. They take a Barbie doll and they make it alive and turn it into a model. So
yeah,
but
slightly less hideous than the original Frankenstein.
yes, slightly less. So Bubbles demands a companion from Frankenstein, he eventually accepts the idea, the bargain, but then goes back on his word, believing that Bubbles will just kill him anyways. So noting that the creature is quite manipulative. So more people die as a result of Bubbles, and Frankenstein is jailed. Frankenstein vows to kill Bubbles as it seems like the only answer. After proving his innocence, Frankenstein returns home and more tragedy strikes, and he sees his creation again, who tells Frankenstein that it's all his fault and then escapes. Frankenstein finishes up telling the story, and Captain Walton takes back over narrating. He watches the Doctor give a rousing speech to the crew members and then dies shortly after from exposure and exertion. The captain then finds Bubbles mourning Frankenstein's body. Now he sees his misgivings and vows to terminate himself, and escapes on a raft, never to be seen again. Did Bubbles actually do that, or was it just a way of escaping, since we know that he framed multiple people for murder and utilized manipulation to get his way more than once? Who knows? Maybe he used it to not be pursued, but that's an interpretation of a book from an author who is, I think, dead, right?
Yeah, if Mary's still kicking around, that she's doing something good.
Yeah. Probably a lot of ice baths and skin peels. So with the direction of how the story goes, I would guess the former, but since there's no definitive proof, it could be up for interpretation. So anyways, now that the spoiler free part is over, I can have some stuff I distilled from this book and it would be applicable to self-care. The idea of knowledge. So let's discuss like the idea of like the thirst for knowledge and to improve oneself, because that's essentially what he's trying to do. He's trying to improve the world by finding a way to do something, and that's kind of what that's part of this whole podcast idea is to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he definitely started out innocently enough. That's it. He just like he found stuff he was passionate about, and he's like, absolutely, I'm going to pursue this. Which, on like starting out that way, yeah, that's great, but it can definitely be taken too far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You can take something way too far. Like so I guess from an early age, we would say what would be our catalyst for Frankenstein. It was his the death of his mother that made him be like, all right, now I got to do this thing. I gotta start really getting into it. Like he was already an intelligent person, but now he's like really, really driven. I would say my catalyst was, it was, you know what? I'm trying to think of like what really it was. I guess it would just be any kind of like a basic little health scare. Like I was when I was younger, and I felt like I had a like kind of a something going on. I was like, oh, is this like I had like pain, and I was pre-diabetic, and I didn't know at the time I was, but after looking it up and going to a doctor, I was like, oh, so that's what that was. So it was mostly like a health scare, and that's what it is in this book too. Is like health scare. His mom dies, so a little bit different, but it with me, yeah, it was a kind of like a health situation where I was like, oh, I need to start like actively participating in my own body's well-being.
Yeah. No, that's good.
What would you say for you?
I don't think I'd be able to really pinpoint anything down just from before that I can remember. Even like my parents telling me stories. Like I've always just loved learning.
Yeah.
And I would more classify it as growing, but mostly in the realm of learning, like trying out new things. That's what figuring out how stuff works, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I tend to just go down rabbit holes. That's it when I find something that I don't know about and want to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always been a good drive for me is just trying to understand things that I didn't understand yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes sense. I guess I've always had a thirst for knowledge in general of biology, but of other things, not of myself. So like, I know I can tell you all sorts of facts about fish, reptiles. I can tell you what the current, or not the current. I don't know if there's a different new fastest bird in the world. But back in the day, the fastest animal on Earth, which technically wasn't propelled by its own wings, was the kestrel falcon, which could go like 200 miles an hour, dive bomb. But who knows what it is now? Self-propelled, probably a cheetah or, an iguana.
Those things can book.
Especially when they're going for their main prey, which is apes. Just kidding. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess that the thirst for knowledge is kind of a big thing, and let's see here. Frankenstein is rattled with grief when his mom dies, but his love of chemistry is what he uses to come up with his technique for animating the inanimate. And the monster actually enjoys life and wants to share that with the other people. However, he eventually starts to demand attention and love because no human would accept him. So they both kind of wanted external rewards, which is what made them do what they do. So like they're not as engaged. Like it's an external motivator versus an intrinsic one. And I think that's the difference is like when you're really truly interested in something versus an interest for yourself, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that he at least Frankenstein did mention a lot that he did want the validation from others. For the most part, there were some messaging around like him finding pursuits worthy of himself.
Yeah,
that could be interpreted as intrinsic, but if anything, those were more unhealthy.
Yeah.
Mindsets of like trying to compare himself to like great philosophers and he had another term for them in the book, not scientists, like apothecaries or something like that. I can't think of what it was, but basically saying he's like. He was of the mindset as basically a college kid of like, this is where I belong, was the closest intrinsic stuff that he had, which I wouldn't say was a very grounded mindset for him to have. But yeah, primarily it seemed like external motivation seemed to be his big thing, was caring what other people thought about him.
Yeah. And the monster itself, obviously doing what it did, and then expecting love back, and then eventually not getting it, and lashing out, showing that the creature had more of a mindset of maybe a child. It was essentially an infant with massive strength and size, just a giant evil baby. So here I wanted to talk a little bit about the what we could call the 4 to 5 pillars of health. We're starting this off, and there's been talk of there being 5 pillars of health, 4 pillars of health. The interpretation can be muddled regardless, so we're just going to go with 4 today, and I'll briefly discuss the 5th so it makes sense. So we got stress, sleep, how you move, how you eat, right? And with stress, in this book, this book is not stress-free. This is stress is like the main motivation and drive, like not motivation, but main drive of a lot of these characters in this book is it's all stress. Frankenstein spreads himself too thin. He's not sleeping, which is, he's basically on a revenge quest, like the entire book.
Yep. Putting off all other aspects of his life to pursue a goal, which only would compound that stress. That's if you're so focused on one thing that you can't do the other stuff that would help de-stress you.
Yeah,
there's no way to kind of shrug that off.
Yeah, he's not in a good position for sure. And the same goes for the monster. Now, however, the monster is a reanimated, we'll say corpse, but there's not a lot. So in this book, there's not a lot of talk of eating. So we could almost skip that part. We'll just have to assume that neither of them are really eating well. We could address it. Yeah, they're probably not eating well, either of them.
The only one that I found is when he was out without good access to food. He had talked about like the drive to forage for acorns and stuff like that because there wasn't a lot of stuff going on, and that was really the only one that I really found, which I was like, oh geez, that could actually get into like the healthiest part where he's actually being forced to hunt for food, which could have been the healthiest part of that whole thing.
Yeah actually the force and the movement required for that. So obviously there's not a lot of physical, I want to say, mentions of, there's not a lot of books out there that go into training montages. So you're not going to see with like one that I can notably say in mind, which is Ready Player One, where the main character like actually sits down. We'll talk about that book eventually too, but that character actually like sits down and is like, I'm gonna bang this out. I'm gonna get stronger and lose weight, do this, all this. Like he gets on a kick. There's not really a kick like that in this book because Frankenstein, we don't see him like running up a snowy mountain carrying a log and like punching sides of beef in a freezer.
Cue the Rocky theme up in the hills of Eaglestadt or whatever the place was called.
Yeah. Steinen, Klampen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's not a lot of that, but I mean, we do know that he does. So if we're going to go with movement, we would just say that he exerted himself way too much as a living being. I mean, this is a book, this is a story that you can push your character however far you want to push him to a point that's believable or acceptable to the masses as a like, oh yeah, that's a thing that could happen. I mean, there's movies about people who drive cars to hit another car that's going after another car that's in sky. So that's a Fast and the Furious reference, I figured. But anyways, so yeah, that's movement. The movement part, sleep, we know this one for sure. Neither of them are really sleeping.
Oh yeah, no, that they missed that one just about entirely. It was at least for the doctor, heavily documented, or as he was like recalling the early parts of his study. That's what it was, regularly staying up to past 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. Yeah, that's the nighttime one.
Yeah.
What? And just clearly not getting good sleep, and that getting him drained to the point where he like seemed like fell into like a coma for a while. That's after his friend showed up.
Yeah.
Like that's just so malnourished, like physically and mentally, that it's like he just couldn't keep functioning that way. And so lack of sleep played a big part of that.
Yeah. So like the Frankenstein basically ate and drank sleepless nights and stress. That was his downfall. I mean, the book actually did a fairly good job of showing how quickly someone can deteriorate just by not paying attention to themselves, because that's exactly what he does. Which is funny because we call Frankenstein we called him the original bodybuilder at the beginning of this, but in reality he was the exact opposite. Like as a bodybuilding in itself as a definition point, I know a lot of people see it as the competition where you dehydrate yourself and you work out as hard as you can until you can't stand yourself any further. But the actual etymology, if you just break it down, is pretty simple. It's a way to build a body, and essentially you'd be building your own body if you paid attention to yourself, which is exactly the opposite of what Frankenstein does. I mean, we're starting off from like not even ground zero. It's like negative ground zero.
Yeah.
Like this is what not to do, and then go the other way.
Yeah, and also what not to do.
Yeah.
Because it was not what you don't want to do for yourself, and not what you want to do to help others.
Right, exactly. Don't help. Yeah, don't spread yourself too thin. Get good sleep. Eat good food. Don't rob graves.
Yeah,
I would say that's a solid. That's if there's any advice you can get out of this specific episode, don't rob graves. Right.
That and. How did they brought him when they found Frankenstein on the ship? They resuscitated him by giving him a brandy massage. That's important.
That is important.
You should try that out.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna learn the art of the brandy massage, and we'll see how that works out. I don't know if it's just like he had a brandy while they gave him a massage, or if they just massaged brandy into his skin.
Yeah, no, they like specifically said they massaged him with brandy, and then also got him to drink some.
Okay.
So yeah. They were rubbing limbs with alcohol.
Oh, so they dehydrated his skin a little bit too. I mean, your skin is actually an organ, and it will absorb alcohol, and you will be able to get drunk off it if you like soaked in it for long enough. Though that would probably sting some stuff.
And probably a very expensive bath too.
Yeah, and then nobody can drink that alcohol except you. I mean, and even then,
depending on how popular you were, you could probably bottle it back up and sell it for a profit.
You know what? That's a good idea. Not for me, but for somebody else who's much better looking.
That's also not me.
Yeah, well, we'll find someone.
There we
like,
go.
Hey, we need you to make boob booze. Right? Yeah. Or anything.
Special edition red breast.
Yeah, there you go. Special edition red breast. There you go. That's perfect.
Podcast is not sponsored by Red Breast.
Yeah. We are not yet. But
yeah,
hey,
there we go.
Yeah, a health podcast that's specifically endorsed by like alcohol and like cigarettes and
that would be funny.
But yeah. So the fifth one, which doesn't really apply much in this, they usually talk about is light. Light being a very big component of the actual human. You could almost throw that into, and it sounds weird, into what you eat, because your body essentially eats the light, right? You absorb the light and then you utilize that to create hormones. Hormones are very important in your body. Everything is a hormone. Most people think of it as testosterone or estrogen because they only think of the sex hormones. But in reality, insulin's a hormone. Ghrelin, leptin, serotonin, all these things. They're all important, and every one of them has different functions, and they all react to each other. It's almost like dominoes. So when one falls down, the other ones start falling too. It just depends on which one falls first. And that's how those pillars of health work. Think of them as like a bigger version of those dominoes. Once one of those dominoes starts falling down, those pillars start falling, and you have to like set them back up, and you have to like focus on one at a time, or else it just takes you all day long to set those things up, because you just keep setting them up, one pillar a little bit at a time. It'll take you forever. But that's kind of a ramble.
No, it's good, but that they never specifically mentioned light, but when his not Igor came back, helped get him back to good health, that is, he did specifically mention that he got into better spirits over the fortnight is what he called it. But a lot of that he equated to, I forget the word he described it, but basically he meant fresh air outside.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that he noted, was he wasn't in his lab in the dark, not getting out, eating regularly, not over focusing, or I can't think of the term, obsessing.
Yeah.
Because that's something I don't do over.
Not at all.
Over his experiments, that's it. He was able to hit probably all of those pillars and recover somewhat fairly quickly due to the efforts of his friend.
Yes.
But regardless of what the driving force is, if you're getting those pillars, you will see health benefits.
Yeah. And that does bring up another real quick little point. In some cases, the stress pillar is replaced with social, how you are in social. I feel like social is an aspect of stress that you can kind of like overlay that with, but his friend being his social aspect, that person who is there, like when you have support with other people, like trying to go alone on things is a really hard endeavor, and that friend really helped him like get over some health problems. Of course, at the very end of it all, he had, everyone ends up dying, and it's terrible and sad, but he did help him a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is our interpretation of, well, my interpretation. I don't know if you have any more awesome little tidbits that you had saved up there.
The only other thing, which is more of like an over-encompassing thing for like the theme of the story, which still ties back more to the stress or the social aspect or the mental health of this book, was him obsessing over the knowledge due to the loss of his mother, which like was almost simultaneous to the loss of his what he referred to as the cousin, his adopted sister.
Yeah.
Because not only did she almost have to take over the role of mother for the family, like keep stuff in line, but that was also when he was shipped off to a school and then just physically separated from her and his best friend. So that's it. He lost all that kind of friendship, and that probably had a big part to play in his obsessing over that stuff. And even the original narrator, the captain of the ship, that's the way the book starts, it has nothing to do with Frankenstein. It's letters this captain is writing to, was it his wife?
Yes,
or the wife, or maybe his sister.
Yeah, it's his family member.
Yeah, it's a family member of some sort. But talking, the journal is talking about he has reservations about doing this sailing, mostly because he wants a friend, someone to be close with and have a connection with, that he's not really getting from like really grizzly, hardened sailor dudes.
Yeah.
And so it really just highlights the kind of like emotional state of like you need support from other people. And you could read into that way too much to think that maybe because Dr. Frankenstein lost everybody he really cared about,
yeah,
that helped drive his ability to create someone to get that connection back with.
Yeah.
Which is the big part that I didn't like about the book, is he was so driven to do that, and then he finally creates somebody, he's like, oh wow, no, this is ugly. I don't like it anymore.
Right? Yeah, he's immediately turned off by the fact that that the creature looks ugly, which is just it's another extrinsic thing that makes him seem like an even bigger dickhead.
Yeah. So no, that was pretty much it. Is the message of mental health that's it with being around other people and what kind of impact that can have.
Yeah, it's and again, the stress being a part of the mental health side of it. Obviously this can get into a whole thing about mental health and stuff like that. And there will be more books that dive a little bit deeper into that kind of thing with the characters and or the for the nonfiction stuff, like things that are directly linked to whatever diet, whatever. Like, we're not going to just divulge all the information of a book that is specifically nonfiction, because we want you to read these books. This book is definitely something that I would recommend read, so you have the idea of what this story is all about, like in reality, and not just like watch a movie and go, oh, okay, I get the idea of Frankenstein. Like, the movie didn't translate it exactly anywhere near close. So, anyways, yeah, that's what I've got. So, what about you? Any more, or
no, that was the last one that I had.
the last super rant?
But
it was a good rant.
Yeah,
I have a good rant too.
Yeah,
Well,
reiterate, read the book.
read the book.
Check it out.
Yeah. I guess I didn't even think about a sign off. Thanks for reading. You're not reading this. You're listening. But you're playing it. So I guess you'd still say thanks for playing.
I don't know. Maybe something about flipping the page. We'll figure out a good one.
Oh, I got to turn the page. Wash your hands. Nah, that one was taken by Filbert from Rocko's Modern Life.
Yep. When is that gonna get into a public domain?
Yeah, we don't have it can't be much longer. That show must have come out 65 years ago. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Nickelodeon. I don't know how much they try to go after copyright infringement. Yeah,
or podcasts.
Yeah.
But anyways, we've definitely we'll figure it out. But until then, I guess thanks for playing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you guys have a good one.